they're sitting there on the earth, they're just in their imagination forever. They live forever inside their own imagination. And they're in the recycling zone. So they're not competing for food, they're not in that game at all. There's always food available because they recycle and turn everything over to the next generation. These are electron micrographs of mycelium. There's one more right after that. And that's what it's about to put out, a little fruiting body. And this is of the mycelium fruiting mass. And that's another 2 pictures that Paul Stanley sent to me. This is a wild mushroom that I actually took that picture near Machu Picchu. And that's a medicinal mushroom growing out of wood. Even though we don't know what that is, as long as it doesn't glow in the dark, I would actually eat that. Glow in the dark. There's always an exception to every rule. There's always the rule, the anti-rule, and the X factor. Let's talk about that for a second. Anybody aware of the teachings of Charles Fort? Yes? No? Never heard of him. Fort, F-O-R-T, like a Fortean dilemma. The teaching of Charles Fort, very interesting philosophy. There's a rule, right, which is like you jump off a 10-story building, you're dead. There's also an anti-rule. You jump off a 10-story building, you live. But then there's an X factor always. Some people jump off a 10-story building unhurt. All 3 of those have been observed. That's how it is. What about the guy going up on the gallows? You remember that famous story from England? Like, it's possible that you go up on the gallows and you get up there and they pull the floor out from underneath you and boom, you're dead. It's possible, very rarely, that you could live. It's also possible that the bottom will open. Now that happened. There's a very famous story coming out of England that Charles Fort cites. And in that story, what happened is that this guy went up on the gallows and they tried to pull the thing and it wouldn't work. They sent the next guy up there, it did work. They put him back up there, didn't work. They're like, what's going on? So they put a stay on the whole thing. Next time they check, make sure the mechanism was working. He gets up there, doesn't work. So they released him. Yeah. It's like, yeah. It's like, come on, like, duh, winning. That's what I would do. If I walked down to there, I'd be like, duh, winning. Okay, let's see. There's all different kinds of shapes and sizes. They come looking like angels or butterflies. These are the magic mushrooms of my forest, which are Amanita pantherina, which are associated with the whole Santa Claus mythology and the elves and the reindeer. You guys know about that connection? Yeah, definitely want to look up the whole connection between Amanita, Muscaria, and Santa Claus. And the whole idea of why you come down the chimney and the hanging the trees and what a real Christmas present is, which is a box of those dried up for you, right? Somebody in the fall went out into the forest and dried it out in the sun properly, so you can convert the ibotenic acid into muscimol via the sunlight UV radiation, and then dry them out properly, and then put them in a nice little mason jar for you. And then on Christmas Eve went, oh, here's your little Christmas present.
Yeah, it's in there, didn't it?
Sweet.
It's like that. All right, let's keep going. There's different looks of them. You know, they're so fun. This is the polka dots. That's where the polka dot name comes from. That's the very first reishi mushroom find I had. That particular day was wild. I was out in the forest with a friend of mine. She said, this tree's got reishi in it, and it's definitely this area here. And we went back and forth. We come back and forth across that forest for almost 3 hours, could not find it. Finally, we down and dejected. We're like, I guess this wasn't our day. So you know how when you're down and dejected, you like this, you're like, and literally, there it was. That's literally what happened. Because these things are intelligent and they actually communicate telepathically, right? Clairvoyantly. They have all those properties. And so all of a sudden I was like, and I looked down and I saw something that was bone red smooth. It was bone red and smooth, like bone. And I was like, what? And there, the tree had fallen over and they were all right there. Right at our feet the whole time.
Beautiful.
That's how reishi mushroom is, and it's always like that. Whenever you find it, it's going to be like a weird moment like that. You're like, whoa. Okay. That's Fomes fomentaris. That's the mushroom we use to control fire for 50,000 years. 50,000 years.
Does it grow in different trees?
It will grow in different trees, yes. Fomes fomentarius, the fire-starting mushroom. And what you do is you take a rock, you bust it open, and in the middle is a dry tinder. And you can use that to spark a flame, especially if you pee on it, dry it, pee on it, dry it. You can also do that with shaga mushroom, which we're going to look at here in a second. Pee on it, dry it, pee on it, dry it, pee on it, dry it, and then it becomes flammable. And then you can spark flint onto it, and it will ignite even in a wet rainforest. That's how humans controlled fire all over the world, even in New Zealand, even in Australia, for 50,000 years. The same exact technology, same exact technique. A mushroom is intimately involved. So again, an alchemical thing here, isn't it? See, the whole thing with these mushrooms is it has an alchemical attraction. It's an alchemical concept of what a mushroom is and how it works. The whole thing has this really interesting intelligence going on. And so our whole thing with like fire and alchemy, I think those things are pretty related. That's just me, I could be wrong. Yes, a medicinal mushroom. It's basically in this environment, it's cordyceps. Has the same virility factors, male virility factors as cordyceps.
And is that one of the more common shelf tree mushrooms?
Yes, it's very common. It's one of the most common mushrooms in the world, and that's why it was so used. You could also do this. You could core out a piece of it and pull out like a little chunk so you can core into the middle of it, drop your ember in there, cap it with a little bit of the top of the mushroom, and then seal it and walk around with fire. You're a firefighter, aren't you? So you know. See?
Wow.
And that's how we control. This is how it was done. And if you go online, you can actually look this up on YouTube. There are guys out there like Celtic dudes who will show you like, oh, mate, this is how you do it. And they show you how to spark with a flint tool. Very interesting. Okay, let's keep going. There's another look at them.
Right, those are all the fomentarius.
Fomes fomentarius. Fomes fomentarius.
Yes, I know, those are very easy.
Yeah, they're very common. Okay, now we probably need to go back and pull up a whole bunch more pictures.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We get very hard at work. Don't want that one.
I have to close all of them.
Okay, that's cool. We're getting kind of a review of everything. That bottle that you saw there, that's how we produce our ORMUS gold. We put it in Myron glass. Now, it really should be in a plastic bottle, but I am so averse to plastic. It's like, oh God, we got through all this trouble to produce such a product and then put it in a plastic bottle. Now, the actual Myron glass is probably the best thing for the ORMUS materials, but it will still eat into it. It will still eat it. Okay.
How long does it take before, how long does it take for it to eat it?
Years. It will take years. It will actually eat into the dropper piece first, because the Myron glass is actually a little bit more dense and it's not easy to get an angle on it. So the ORMUS materials will actually eat into the dropper bottle first. So I've had those shear at the bottom, for example. And it has a hunger for silica. It's part of what balances it, as we know. I think most of us would realize that. Okay, now this particular reishi mushroom, I took this at various different stages of its growth. This is in the beginning of its growth. This tree was killed in a lightning strike during a lightning storm. The next year, reishi mushroom grew out of it. Now that's like, who cares? Except that's on the whole power spot on the whole property. That is the spot on the property where the action is. That's a Native American sacred site. It's on my property up in Canada, and it's called Land of Sweet Water Meeting Place. And a reishi grew out of it, and I was like, whoa, man, that's a reishi. Okay, so the next picture, so then it grew, it finally started looking like that.
Wow.
So we call that the lightning reishi. And then, well, hold on. Before you go to the next one, Gary, watch this. Reishi mushrooms or any mushrooms don't have anything to do with like UFOs or anything.
Oh my gosh.
They wouldn't be related in any way, shape, or form. They couldn't have anything to do with each other or anything.
Yay.
And that's the spot right there, that spot right there is the tallest spot within like 100 miles radius around. And there's that area right there, and those trees, those trees are tough. And then out of it grows a reishi mushroom. Now when you do the wild reishi like that, it tastes like butter. Now I want to talk about this for a second, because that's exactly what our theories would predict on this whole ORMUS business. That if it's a wild mushroom, especially a reishi, then it should actually have lower triterpenes and higher polysaccharides, which I looked the data up, and that is true. The actual log-grown stuff, if you kind of synthetically do it, or if you just impregnate logs with it with plug spawn, it will have higher triterpene and lower polysaccharide. But if it's a wild reishi in nature, it has higher polysaccharide, lower triterpene, which means it goes after the ORMUS materials more, the polysaccharide. Right? Now that also, in the flavor being like butter, it's like oil, because the polysaccharides have eventually cascaded into the formation of oils. Right? The beginning of carbohydrate formation in nature is the beginning of like what happens in springs, which we'll see on Sunday when we do this nature walk. When we get up there to where the source of these springs are, and you look at them, it's very oily. The water is extremely dense, oily, and cold, which is like an oil. That's the beginning of carbohydrate formation. Drinking that, it's sweet, like sweet water, land of sweet water. Right? That's the beginning of carbohydrate formation. In plants, it creates sweetness. It helps to develop the polysaccharide fraction.
It also slicks my lips. Does this slick
Yeah,
your lips?
yep. And so it's like
Slick.
it's almost like a lubricant, right? Which is what oils are. So when you have those kinds of experiences and you start putting it all together, then you start thinking, we're on the right track here. And here's what I think is actually going on here, by the way. Everything that has been done here, everything that David Hudson has done, and all the work that's been done afterwards is really a rediscovery of alchemy. And what I believe ORMUS is, and I actually think that a lot of this phenomenon isn't actually ORMUS, it's other phenomena, alchemical phenomenon. But the actual ORMUS materials themselves, the actual metallic ceramic substances, are actually the salt of the metal. And I think if you play around with stuff long enough, you kind of start coming to that conclusion, because you put like molten sodium onto gold, you'll produce ORMUS gold. We've done that in our laboratory, it explodes. You have to be very careful. In a tantalum crucible, giving you a hint. We had a cast tantalum crucible made, because tantalum will not interfere with sodium. And then blew that up. We were just doing that, and we'd take other materials, lick it out, and eat it. I got the strongest effects from that I got from any ORMUS I've ever taken, but that was just that. You get some effects. It's an endothermic reaction eventually that goes, and it pulls all the energy out of the gold. Salt of the metal pulls all the energy out, breaks all the metallic bonding down, so you get back to the original ORMUS material, salt of the metal. That's my strong feeling about what many of these ORMUS materials are. Now, I think some of these ORMUS materials are actually other phenomenon. They might be the sulfur of the metal, or the mercury of the metal, or other alchemical phenomenon that are going on that we're just rediscovering. So that's just my take on it. You take your take on it.
Yeah, I've heard that eating raw mushrooms, there's cancer chemicals that you should cook them first before you eat them. Have you ever heard that?
Yes, and we're going to get there. Hang on tight. I've got a whole thing there. I've gone over time. It's 21 minutes. We were going to take a break, but I think we're just going to power on through another 10 minutes here. Is that cool?
Yeah.
9 minutes.
Yeah.
You okay with that?
Go.
Okay. All right, let's keep going. That was a cool thing I pulled off the internet. It's like a mushroom spaceship. There we go. Okay. That was an interesting reishi that I pulled out of Douglas fir, which is extremely unusual and very rare. And a reishi will do that. It will come out in places where you go, whoa, what's it doing there? Let's keep going.
Is that sticky like that when it comes out?
It's-
Like sticky rather than
It is not sticky, but it's lacquered. It looks like somebody has gone over with lacquer and made it shine like that. And that's how you know you've got reishi. When it's lacquered like that, then you know, like, whoa, that's the real story. This is in upstate New York. Tom Kushwall's a wild reishi picker. Raise your hand, Tom. And that wasn't at your place, but that was a vine that we had in upstate New York. I turned all of that reishi into a spagyric. And it took 6 months into a reishi spagyric. That thing was like rocking. It put you up there and down there at the same time. Okay, let's keep going. Fairy steps, I'm sorry, that was reishi mushroom.
Wow.
Yeah, so Stairway to Heaven? Oh no, I guess I was reishi mushroom. Let's do the next one, look at this one. That's it from above, so looking down. The red color of reishi going into the purple, that's the color of beta-glucans for those of you who are familiar with that non-polar polysaccharide, which is definitely an ORMUS-carrying substance. And I'm going to go back again, like if we're really, really clever, we could grow things in such a way to increase the fraction of ORMUS. So now what I do, when I do my plug spawn, when I'm taking like logs out of the forest and I'm inseminating them with mycelium from reishi or maitake or other mushrooms like that, because in my forest we have the softwood reishi, the suge, which is the kind you just saw, that kind. And in the Chinese forest they have the lingji, which is the hardwood reishi. Now I can grow that hardwood reishi on maple, but it's not natural to the ecosystem, or at least so rare that it doesn't show up very much. So I'm going to go ahead and inseminate a maple tree that I took down because it was falling into the house. So we dropped it, and then I had the guys cut it up into big, huge logs. That was, by the way, I felt like Rocky IV. If you remember that film when he's like carrying all those logs and stuff in the snow, that was me about a month ago. Running around the yard, like moving logs that were so ridiculously heavy. I was like, this is probably not a good idea, but whatever. I get to get them in place and then impregnate them with the plug spawn of the lingqi, which is the Chinese reishi, and then spray them with my concentrate of ORMUS that I put into a spray bottle. When I drill the hole, I spray it in the hole, pound the thing in there, spray it again, cover it with hot wax.
Wow.
Pretty easy. The whole thing takes seconds, really.
Beeswax?
Beeswax, and I use only beeswax, and that's what you're supposed to do when you do plug spawn. If you've ever done plug spawn, you know what I mean. If you've never done plug spawn, really something good to look into. It's the easiest and quickest way to produce medicine, and what an experiment. Now I've got inoculated in my yard, let's see, 4 tree stumps and about 20 logs. Done that way.
It germinates under the wax?
Yeah, so what it's doing is the mycelium explores into the wood and eventually contaminates the wood, and then will produce a fruiting body somewhere, or multiple fruiting bodies.
How long when are you going to harvest?
Well, whenever they show up. Now, it takes anywhere from 8 months to 3 years. If you do it right, it's going to be 8 months or a year. In our climate, it's going to be a year. If you do it wrong, it's 3 years. But it works. So go back to 1 second. That is the kind of appearance you're going to see on a reishi that comes out of, say, this environment or any environment. Reishi is present in all forested ecosystems all over the whole world, and it is the most well-studied herbal medicament on Earth. There's nothing more well-studied than reishi mushroom on the Earth. So right there, if you put it all together, it's like, okay, there's definitely something going on with this stuff, and now we've got an angle of how to make that even better. And I've got actually a number of angles of how to make that better, which if I have time, we'll go into it. We'll explore it together, because that's the future of medicine on Earth. That's where it's going. Okay, let's keep going. When you turn the reishi upside down, that white part that's underneath, in the sun will convert over to vitamin D2. So what you do with the mushroom is when you pick it, you turn it upside down. This is getting back to this thing about the wet mushroom versus the dry. You always want it dry, and will convert to vitamin D2 under sunlight, not in a stove, and not in a dehydrator, but under sunlight it will do that. And then you can leach in some of your D2 into your body through the winter, and that's like one of the natural strategies in the northern climates to get vitamin D in the winter time. It's one of the ways you do that. Okay, let's keep going. This is a log from Bali. That was my friend Dale. He is an ethnobotanist there in Bali. He's a full-on, this guy's amazing. I'm going to tell you something that we did together. Dale got me 2 red durian sprouts. Now, you didn't hear this here. I never did this. I'm completely innocent. It wasn't me. But somebody got those baby red durian sprouts into Hawaii from the Sumatran jungle and put them into the ground in an ORMUS farm. And they made it. They made it.
Yay.
Yeah, that's the first ones ever in Hawaii. If you know what durian is, then you're going, whoa. If you've ever even heard about red durian, you're really going, dude. Like at that point, dude. This is in coconut. So the lingqi, or the Chinese reishi, likes hardwood. The best tropical hardwood, coconut logs. Listen to this. If you live in the tropics and you got this technology down, you can get 8 flushes a year. Whereas like in our temperate environment in the Catskills and where I'm at in Ontario, we're getting 1. He's getting 8, and look at it. That red, that's the beta-glucans. That purple, that's the beta-glucans. So it's got it going on. Now if you imagine inoculating that log, or taking that whole coconut log and soaking it in ocean water, then soaking it in wet method, then soaking it with Dead Sea salt extracts. I mean, it's just as far as you can think about it, like as far as you want to go with it. And then what medicines are going to come out of that? and then the magic and the enchantment that comes along with it. And this is kind of the angle. The reason why I'm so focused on mushrooms is because to me this is really the angle to get the real, like, the goods. Because the mushrooms are so into that enchanted kingdom. Whereas aloe vera is a really good way. Noni, we've been growing ORMUS noni like nobody in the world is. There's nobody growing noni trees. Like, we have 150 noni trees. All grown with Dead Sea salt, ocean extract, wet method, ORMUS gold, everything you can possibly imagine. Where's Nathaniel? Way in the back, right?
Yeah.
He hates it when I force everybody in the house to go down the ocean and get ocean water, right? He's been there. He's put a bunch of those trees in. Right, Nathaniel?
It's good workout, yeah.
This guy, man, you get him on deer antler or elk antler, he's knocking out 10 holes in the ground. Unbelievable. You know, from all that training, Nathaniel, I put in 35 fruit trees and bushes up at my house by myself. I dug 35 holes. That's the training you get. He taught me how. It was under his direction. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so there's what's called an antler reishi, where it's like a deformed reishi. See that one coming out of the ground? That will usually come off a root. And those have special value in Chinese medicine. And in fact, they'll be in formulas that you'll get reishi, antler, deer antler together. You ever seen those kind of formulas? Ever heard of them? Yeah, that's a rare one. It's coming off a root. If I have the choice and I see a medicinal mushroom coming off a root, I'll pick that one. Always. Because that has a more unique mineral substrate than the actual tree itself has. Okay, keep going. This is birch polypore, another image. Yeah, birch polypore. That's kind of like the bishop on the chessboard. Rishi's queen, Shaga's king. That's the bishop. Piptoporus betulinus. Let's talk about, beet birch. So ORMUS content trees, which are the ones that have got it. Redwood definitely is one, no question about that. The great redwoods, absolutely no question about that. And birch.
400 foot tall, how does it get to the top?
Yeah, how in the world is that? I mean, what is going on there? My whole house is actually built out of one redwood tree. My whole house is built out of one redwood tree.
That'd be a big tree.
That was a big tree, but think about it. It's like those trees are huge and they're resistant to rot. They have very strong antifungal components. If you study these ORMUS materials, you find out that like certain ORMUS materials have very powerful antifungal properties. ORMUS gold has very powerful antifungal properties, ORMUS gold has very powerful antiviral properties, not antifungal. Apparently ORMUS copper is antifungal. So we found that out. Like ORMUS gold doesn't do anything against fungus. It does a lot against viruses. One of the things we learned.
Dorian found that upstream from the largest trees on Earth is one of the very, very best petroglyph sites that says this is very good petroglyph material here. This has got everything.
So there you go. Interesting discoveries we're making. Again, the prana
Upstream from it.
the prana is localized now. It's not like it was in the old days where it was everywhere, dinosaur times. Now it's localized. Now we have to kind of be paying attention to if you've got a property with a spring on it, you're in heaven. You're in good shape. And that's what you want to look for. You want to look for places where these things are happening and there's a concentration of that mana, those natural forces. Okay, let's keep going to the next one. I love this one. So there's a birch. And birch is all the medicinal mushrooms come off birch. The Amanita pantherina, the magic mushroom, the Christmas and all that, is all associated with birch and certain types of pine trees. But it does grow in the areas of birch roots. So it's an actual, what's called a endophytic mushroom, apparently, where it's working symbiotically with the trees underground, and it gives them nutrients, and the plant, it's ORMUS minerals, and the plant itself will give them sugars. Now, the birch tree will also produce Piptoporus betulinus, which is the birch polypore, an extremely powerful medicinal mushroom. It will produce chaga. It will grow Pholinus mushrooms, which are very powerful anti-cancer, and it will produce ORMEs fomentarius. So a very wide array of medicinal mushrooms come off the birch tree. And in Celtic lore, Birgide, in her rings of trees of birch, was in the zone of the immortals. So the immortality regions of Celtic lore are actually birch-growing regions. Okay, so that right there is a wild. Let's go back real quick. That's a wild shiitake.
Whoa.
Yeah. So shiitake is another one growing birch. Out of all the images that I ever throw up on in an audience, kids, when they're doing drawings, will actually always draw that one. Like kids give me drawings at the end of the presentation, instead of like somebody coming up with their notes like, well, I have a question about this. Kid will come up and they'll have a picture of me, like weird old hair and a poncho and stuff, and then in the background, and then I'll be eating like a chocolate bar, and then in the background will be that picture. They always pick that picture for some reason. Because the magic of it is so obvious, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, let's keep going.
Yes.
This is a whole nother way of dating. Right? Dinner and a movie, gone. Deleted, bye. This is a whole other thing. Go out wild mushroom picking. Now, chaga is a concentrator, a heavy concentrator of these materials, because it sits there year after year after year. Reishi dies back, grows back, dies back every year. Chaga doesn't. Every year it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And because it's learned to be perennial, it takes in all of that information from the outer planets, as Steiner described, and all the cosmos. Anything that's annual is all the inner planets and is kind of narrowed down to that game in there. Right? It's looking inward towards the sun. But in order to get that whole cosmic picture, it's got to be perennial, which is all the trees that have learned to put on bark and actually survive through seasons, and then all the mushrooms that grow in living trees like chaga, so that it can actually take on energies and build them up over time. Ginseng is like that. The ginseng, once it becomes 12 or 13 years old, actually produces an immortality type of compound that will keep that ginseng growing on forever, hundreds of years, if somebody doesn't pick it. And the ginseng itself has concentrated all that mana, all that knowledge, all that information. We basically eat annual stuff. You eat a chicken, the chicken was 6 weeks old, right? Think about it. All the lettuce, everything else is all annuals. But when you start getting into like ginseng, the great sacred mushrooms, you're talking about like mana concentrators that have been going for years and years and years, and they're loaded to the hilt with lanostane, triterpenes, polysaccharides, all the strange matter, the ORMUS materials, and therefore they're a prana concentrator. And in my forest, I pick some of them, I leave some of them. I don't pick all the chagas because it's concentrating a certain mana in there. I did notice this year, I went to a particular tree that I picked a chaga off about 4 years ago, and it was dead. It was dead. The tree was dead. And so I thought, ooh, maybe I had something to do with that. Maybe it needed that there. So something to think about. But if you're, if it's a hot day, things are going good, you don't worry about that kind of stuff. All right, let's keep going. That's the inside. When you break the chaga off, that's the inside. This is king of mushrooms. This is the king. Siberian king of mushrooms. It's the king. It's like it dominates. When you understand what chaga is and how to use it, you're making teas out of it. It's #1 anti-cancer herb, period, in the world of anything. It deactivates. Yeah, look at it. He's got his little chaga concentrator over there. He's got this amazing chaga maple. You want to lift that thing up? Right there.
That's good stuff.
When it is like in your body, the melanin, it's 25% of the antioxidants is melanin, like your skin pigment. That is one of the most mineral drawing substances in your body. That's probably an ORMUS content material, melanin. It would make sense because that's what's shielding you from oxidation. And that melanin is most concentrated in the plant world in chaga. It's 25% of its antioxidants is melanin, the highest by far of anything in nature. By far. Now, if you've studied David Wilcock stuff, anybody studied David Wilcock stuff? Okay, so David Wilcock is a good friend of mine, and David Wilcock told me that melanin is the #1 pineal activator. Right? It's like, whoa. Now it's like coming together, isn't it? And it's delivered naturally. I think Barry will agree, and everybody's been an Ormite in here for a long period of time, that really the best long-term strategy is to figure out how to get as much of the stuff from food as possible. That's really probably over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, that's the best strategy. I take every ORMUS supplement out there, I love them all. And regularly, I'm more onto the medicinal mushrooms and things that I procure wildly, and also things that I grow in a certain way to kind of get that ORMUS fraction higher, to get the fraction of it higher, the percentage higher.
Well, I have a question. So you said if you make tea properly, you're gonna have a lot of melanin, #1 pineal activator. So what's the best way to make chaga tea?
I'm going to show you. We're getting there. Hang on tight. 25 minutes.
Oh, well.
5 more minutes. This is not a big deal. You guys hang in there. I know actually you can be a genius for 5 minutes.
Yay.
Okay, so 5 minutes. Anyway, the melanin on that point is the thing that deactivates radioactive isotopes. So under radioactive fallout, the best thing you got is wild shotgun, picked before the radioactive fallout comes. Otherwise, the shotgun, every other medicinal mushroom will absorb it. It sponges it out of the environment, actually. That's part of how medicinal mushrooms work. They will sponge radioactive nucleotides out of the environment and clean it up out of the ecosystem. That's one of the trade-offs that mushrooms have with the environment.
Are you telling us we can't hunt shotgun in the mountains now?
Here, yes. West Coast, no. I think medicinal mushrooms from Northern California up at this point, up in British Columbia, it's a no-go. There's too much radioactive fallout coming down. Over on this side, no problem. I've been monitoring the radioactive fallout in the east coast of the United States. Basically, anything east of the Mississippi has been essentially spared. Any significant amount of radioactive fallout. However, I would still be taking iodine, and I would still be being careful, of course.
Even mushrooms do you
We'll get there. Hold on. We'll get there.
even mushrooms that are inoculated, you're made yourself, basically.
Any mushroom situation that is exposed to the atmosphere can absorb radioactive debris. So if I'm growing on logs and I'm doing kind of a plug spawn operation and it's exposed to the atmosphere, then at that point it's like a wild mushroom in the forest.
Even in your basement, though?
No, in your basement's fine. In your basement's fine. Although I don't know if I put mushrooms in the basement. I don't know. Maybe it's a good idea, maybe not. If you're growing like a techno mushroom product, like that 24 mushroom blend. Hey, Nathalian, can you grab a 24 mushroom blend?
I'm doing it right now. I just bought it.
Okay, so that right there, that product right there is entirely grown indoors in a laboratory environment in that way that I showed you. Remember that the cakes, and it's grown in bags. It's not cake like that. It's grown in bags. And this is a mixture of 24 of the most powerful medicinal mushrooms in the world in like a powdered form that you can like shovel out in massive dosages, because the capsulated stuff ain't enough to turn the juice on. That's like 85 bucks. If that was all encapsulated, that's $500. Just to give you an idea of like where we are. Because if you can't shovel out enough medicine, then it's not going to work. And that's why we do it in that form, in this way, in Myron glass, of course, the best glass in the world. So here you go. Density one line. Thank you very much. Let's keep going here. We've still got a lot of stuff to plow through here in the next 4 minutes and 30 seconds. That's shiitake grown here in Enota. There's another one on this next picture here. That's another grouping of shiitakes grown here in Enota. I don't know if that's still going on. That's a Hericium, a lion's mane that was right next to a spring up in outside of Calgary, and I just was at that spring. That's the one that's off on Canmore. The one off the exit right there. And there's a barbed wire right next to that thing, and I stepped right in that barbed wire, and that thing went right into my foot. Use colloidal silver. No worries. I zapped it, put the zapper on. I used colloidal silver, put my zapper on the darn thing. No worries, no problem. The whole thing healed in 2 days. Colloidal silver is amazing. Jeez, because it's not inflammatory, kids can use it, totally safe, easy to travel with, no one stops you at Borders about it. Wow. Okay, let's keep going. No, oh, by the way, let's go back real quick. Hericium is brain. It's all about nervous system, brain, Parkinson's, right? This lion's mane mushroom. That's it, Parkinson's. We saw that picture already? Okay, now this is something I want to talk about. I will go out into the forest occasionally. Now I procure all kinds of different things from the forest for my farm. Like I'll go out there and I'll procure a whole pile of porcupine poop that's been piling up on this ledge where this porcupine lives. So I'll go and just get buckets of it and just go mix it in with everything else, because it has that unique minerals that porcupines are getting from wood. And then I'll go out and I'll get bat guano. I'll scrape that out from different caves on the property, and I'll do that. I'll go out and I'll get silt from the bottom of the river down below the springs and bring that up and carry that up. And so that's usually my workout. And I'll also go out and pick medicinal mushrooms, and instead of eating them, I will burn them down under a reduction reaction. And this is a trick I learned from Dr. Patrick Flanagan. And what you do is, if you have a wood-burning stove where you can get something going, burning on birch bark, and then clamp the whole darn thing shut so you can get all the oxygen out of there, and then you fill it up with mushrooms, that you can actually burn down the mushrooms and trap some of the ORMUS without oxidizing it or without it converting into a metal. This is a novel strategy for doing that. So I just wanted to put that out there. If you have an environment where you can actually get a fire going and then seal off the atmospheric oxygen and burn the hydrogen, which is the trick in a wood-burning stove. The idea of a wood-burning stove is you get it going really, really hot when you start cutting off the oxygen supply. When it's really hot in there, you keep cutting off the oxygen supply, then you cut it off completely, then you throw a log in there and it burns the hydrogen. And that's what makes the stove really hot. Like my stove will turn like glowing red when I got that going in the middle of the winter. That's something you can do with medicinal mushrooms. You pick them in the forest, burn them down, then you take that ash and you do experiments with it. We've done experiments with that. We've had some weird stuff happen as a result of that. I grew a whole batch of plants that were perfect, but they were miniature. They were miniature, like miniature poppies, miniature everything. It was so weird. It was like, why? That's so weird. So instead of being like huge size, they were actually small.
And you got that from mushrooms?
Right. Yeah. So
So you grew other plants from mushrooms?
Yeah, I grew other plants from mushroom ash. Yeah. And experimenting with that and playing with that because that's something I can do because of that wood burning stove. If you have a tool like that, use it. It's an alchemical device. I mean, again, the alchemist's furnace, right? What a device to have. And a wood burning stove is that. It's an alchemical furnace, which I'm going to get there in a second. Hold on. Okay, let's keep going. All right, that's a shot that's bigger than my head. You can imagine that. Whoa. And there's a shot of bursting out of a tree, out of a birch, and then my hand should be in the next picture. Let's see the next one, yeah. So you can see the size.
Wow.
Okay, let's keep going. And that's like really great news when you get that. This is a Russian ad advertising shaga. So instead of like a bikini, they have a cute girl like in a full-on like parka out in the woods. I pulled that out of a mycology magazine. I was so happy about that. Look at that, so much fun. By the way, when a birch dies that has shaga in it, then you start looking around the base for the shaga fruiting bodies because the part of the shaga you break off isn't the fruiting body. It's actually a mycelial mass. It's one of the only exceptions to that rule. Normally, the mushroom's in the tree, and the part that comes out is the reproductive organ of the mushroom. But in shaga's case, the part that comes out is actually the part that's normally inside the tree. It's the mycelial mass. So that means that shaga, you can break it off, dry it, crush it into a powder, and just eat it. Just like you can in that bottle that Dennis has.
What's the best way to dry it?
Dry it in the sun, always. The sun does do alchemical things to mushrooms. Remember, what is a mushroom? A mushroom is a substance that actually is coming from the inner earth and avoiding the atmosphere, right? So when the mushroom is actually exposed to the sun, there's an alchemical unio mystico, a mystical union of opposites that produces, in most mushrooms' cases, vitamin D2. The inner part of the mushroom, where the triterpenes are, some of those polysaccharides are, will be protected, obviously, from the sun, but the moisture will be drawn off. And that's really what you want to do, is get the moisture off.
Generally, if you knock it into chunks, and you can, one day, one afternoon, just dry it.
1 or 2 afternoons will dry it under full sun in the late summer. So a really good time to go is late summer. That's really mushroom picking season. And then you have enough sun to actually dry your mushrooms and then prepare them to be stored for the winter. And you don't store them in containers. You just leave them out in a box, or you leave them out in a bowl. All right, let's keep going. Here.
Just leave them outside in the bowl?
Yeah, what I do is I put them in a big bowl, like a wooden bowl, and I put them outside. It's kind of like a wok. It's like that. It's very wide. I have about 5 of those. And in that wok, I'll put all the mushrooms in upside down and leave them outside all day on the lawn. And then I'll go out and do whatever I'm doing, or work on the computer, whatever. And then at the end of the day, or if it rains, I'll bring them back in. If it stops raining, I'll bring them back out. So you kind of have that mindset of like, careful of the rain.
You're saying that's where you store your dried mushrooms?
Oh no! Once they're dried, they go right in the middle of the kitchen counter, or they go right in the middle of the